What makes someone a life giver? It's a good question to ask. What does it mean to give life? My friend Jihan Gearon is definitely someone who breathes life and aliveness into the world. And yet, at the age of 35, she was diagnosed with endometrial cancer. She lost her ability to give birth. Her journey of healing has led her to pour her spirit into making the sort of art that can change your life. To understand with her very being, to teach and transmit the truth that we can create anything. It is so powerful to be in relationship with someone who embodies this understanding, who's not just speaking it as a inspiring platitude, but is actually living with it, making art that helps us see it. You see, not one of us is going to be spared the tragedies of human existence. That's something that I've had to come to terms with. Something I've had to learn to accept, that life has its terms. And so it behooves us to learn how to live by being in relationship from those who know the wisdom on the other side of grief, those who know what being alive means. Jihan describes herself as an indigenous feminist, as a painter, a writer, an organizer, and a leader in indigenous environmental justice. She is a Diné and a Nahili, or Black, member of the Navajo Nation. And she also is a graduate of Stanford University. Jihan doesn't just make art. She is also a consultant. She's a teacher. She is somebody that helps leaders and organizations apply the best of indigenous wisdom to those of us, or for those of us that are living our lives trying to make the world whole again. I think you're going to love this conversation. If you don't know me, my name is Gibran Rivera. I am a guide, a teacher, a coach, and a facilitator. And this podcast is an invitation into a decentralized conversation with remarkable humans who are devoting their lives to the evolution of consciousness and culture. Enjoy. Jihan, it's so good to see you. I am thrilled. This podcast interview has been very, very long in the making. So maybe I'll say a quick word about how we met and how we meandered our way here. I met you. You were a participant in the Young Climate Leaders Network, which I was privileged to facilitate. You were in the cohort of 2016. Great things have come out of that Young Climate Leader Network work, including a whole lot around the Sunrise Movement, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But yours was a striking presence from the very beginning. Um, and I very especially remember one an introductory point in that first retreat. We have multiple retreats together. When you made a direct line between patriarchy and what we're doing to the earth, and you brought that in quite powerfully. And it's seems to be something that's still with you as I look at the shirt that you're wearing today that says "Bring back the
Yeah.
matriarchy." So I, I want to make sure that we are definitely going to get into this magical journey that you've made from uh, climate activists, indigenous climate activists, to artists, and how you're balancing both, and that's such an inspiring part of who you are. This podcast is a podcast of conversations with people who are devoting their lives to the evolution of consciousness and culture. And I see evolution as the creative life force of the universe, and I see the artist as the person that is most committed to most surrendered, most given, most dedicated to that creative life force. And that's a big reason for why I want to speak. But I wonder if you could say a couple of words about that line that you made, and others made, but that you held so strongly between our relationship to the earth and patriarchy.
Hmm. Well, I mean, I've done a lot of even more thinking since then, and done some reflection and light research around how patriarchy fall pre was prior to the fossil fuel industry on my reservation, the Navajo Nation, and how the matriarchal system, which Navajos traditionally are matriarchy, we have clans, a clanship system, and we are who our mother's clan is. Like that's our, rather than a last name, right? We are our mother's clan, and what comes with that is lots of stories and a lot of responsibilities based off of that lineage, right? Um, and a lot of that is about the land, right? And like, say for me, my clan is Twittich so I'm really big protector and connected to water, especially, and there's a lot of teachings and things around that, even to this day. That's like, if someone's looking for rain, they bring their Twittich relative to their land. Do you know what I mean? To just like call the
Wow.
rain. And
Right.
you kind of can, you
Beautiful.
pour water on them, say, to get rain. You do the
Wow.
same thing with the frog, like pour water on the frog that you see to bring rain. So it's still there, it's not like gone in the past, but um that matriarchal system has been intentionally destroyed in order, it had to be, in order to bring things like the coal industry and the timber industry and water extraction to the Navajo Nation. It caused a lot of disruption. So I'd say traditionally, in the matriarchy, the women are tied to the land, and so we kind of stay there, right? And if we have if we have daughters, then our daughters will also stay there. If we have sons, then the sons go off to the in-laws, right? Um, but when like the U.S. government and everything came in, and then they gave quote unquote ownership of land, and decision making of land and resources to the oldest males around, right, which are people who are not from there, right, and do not have the responsibilities of that place. So that, and that's coming along with the boarding school systems, where kids were taken off and away into the boarding schools to like learn these kind of Christian ways of thinking, and especially gender roles, right? So then all these men are coming back out being like, actually, I'm, the head of the household, and that's what I've been taught, right? And so now this is when they bring in the fossil fuel industry and create a quote unquote business council of men, right? To allow this to happen, right? And I mean, and I can keep going on and on and on, but that was kind of like a first step. But there's a lot of different policies that have been put in place to um, deteriorate the leadership, decision making power, and autonomy of women on the Navajo Nation.
That's so powerful. Wow, you just educated me so much more than anything I even began to understand when I first heard you speak of this. I'm really thankful for that. It's 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 uh it's much more literal an intervention than I imagined it to be. Right? To me, it sounded like a distinction that I've learned to make over the years, and it took me some time to make, is a distinction between masculinity and conscious masculinity and patriarchy, right? And so for a long time, uh, especially seeing how I myself, how how some of the worst things I had done or still have done were because of patriarchy. I put the two together, and it's taken me a while to tease them apart. But I see patriarchy as a type of extractive domination, and I see that as very defining to the relationship. What the industrial economy, the relation that the industrial economy has with the earth is extractive, and it seeks to dominate everything on it rather than live with it, and kind of receive the gift that and nurture and protect that gift, right? Rather than just extract it. And that to me is was the way I first heard it when you spoke it, and it impacted me so powerfully. But now when you get into like the details of how it worked in your specific nation, it's mind-boggling. It's baffling how strategic
Mm-hmm.
these moves were, and still
Yeah.
are.
Yeah. I think it's like you said, I think it is important to like bring these kind of discussions down to the concrete too, like actually this is what actually happened as a specific example of what we're talking about in kind of like a broader scale.
Yeah,
And you're what you just reflected around like Mother Earth and Father Sky is the way I was thinking about it as you were talking too. It's I think we also need to relearn something like, let's say, like a spirit like the sun, right, which is the male energy, and like this idea of, oh, he sees over us and watches over us, and like like you can see it as a dominating perspective, right, like he's above us, or you can see it as he's protecting us, he's watching over us, he's committed
right.
to us and Mother Earth so much that he's just every single day he comes, right, every he burns for us because through love and care for us and Mother Earth, right? So it's also just like how you see it.
Yes, yes. That just gave me
We've been taught to see one
that just
way.
gave me good. Yeah, yeah. That just gave me goosebumps. Hafiz has this beautiful poet poem where he says, "Even after all this time, the sun never says to the moon, look how much I love you." It
Yeah.
Look at what happens with a love like that. It lights up the whole sky. It's just a gift, right? It's just a gift.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I want to ask you, and this is a question that I asked at the beginning of the podcast. I want to ask you if you can share a belief that you once held to be true, perhaps a belief that defined you, um, that now either you no longer hold to be true, or at least hold more lightly. And I ask this question because we live in this time of polarization when everybody just seems to be getting into their ideological bunkers and doubling down and becoming what I consider religious fundamentalists about all of our beliefs, our political beliefs, our mimetic mimetic tribes. One can say like people that think just like us, and we just kind of make it all the same thing, same thing, same thing. And I'm just like to show people that the leaders that we're talking to here are people that have had the courage to change their mind about something. And I'm wondering if there's something you could share that is true for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I've been working on is what exactly what you said, is trying to unlearn thinking in binaries, and for me a tough one is right and wrong. Like I've really pressured myself all this time, and I'm a bit of a perfectionist, right? I was an executive director for a long time, the type of person to like dot my i's and cross my t's or whatever, but just the idea of like I can either make the right choice or the wrong choice, or like the good choice or the bad choice, and actually like as I've taken time away from that, realizing like how much that actually gets me stuck in doing nothing. You know, if I'm worried about making the correct choice or the good choice or being the good person or something like that. I think I've mentioned this to you before, but I really got into and have created all these kind of like personal tools to use around this one teaching about the quartz crystal. That's a Navajo teaching. Um, that and this was taught to me by a man named Steve Darden. He lives in Flagstaff, and he's a Navajo man as well. He came to teach one of our youth organizing trainings, one summer when I worked with Black Mesa Water Coalition still. And we always tried to add also a cultural component to things too, like to help people learn more about their culture and know how to practice it in a way that's, they feel confident in doing. So he came to teach us about quartz crystals, right? Crystals are something that we include in our medicine bags and use, in ceremonies and things like that. And I will say, like before Sedona appeared, right, and kind of became this like new agey thing that everybody's like, yeah, that's actually part of our culture, right? So, um, and so he told us, different teachings around, how to take care of it, how to choose it, how to cleanse it, and all that kind of things, where to put it, how to care for it, how it can be used. But the thing that really stuck with me was that he said that we should always we have ones that are 12 sided, like in our medicine, that they should have 12 sides. And I'm obsessed with number 12 because my birthday is December 12th, 12. I'm just like, that's my favorite number. So it stuck with me.
Happy belated, by the way. Happy belated.
Thank you. And, and he said, they should be 12 sided because in Navajo, this is how we see things, that everything has at least 12 different ways of looking at it. And he said, in the mainstream world, it's always like one or two ways. And he had acted as some sort of like indigenous system here in Flagstaff. I don't think like as an actual judge, but someone who judged, what would happen to people, right? And he said he saw a lot of Navajo people, a lot of brown people coming in, and he's like, his job was either like, it just was like, send them to jail, right? And how there was no room for anything else besides that. And so that's how that teaching became really important to him. But it just kind of blew my mind. I started to think like really trying to ingrain that in everything and be like, okay. And of course, observing yourself when you're having when I'm having that tension of is this the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do? Trying to let that go and be like, okay. And I've actually made a little worksheet where I'll do like at least 12 different ways to look at this, to try and help my mind like wrap my head around it. And then also just to see things as choices, right? Like instead of the right choice or the wrong choice. So for me, that's been a big one.
That is I find already as you speak it, the liberating power of it. I also grew up in a religious. I grew up not also. I grew up in a religious community with with a fundamentalist perspective about things, and that obsession with what was right and what was wrong, and trying to make every choice according to this singular identity because that's all you were. This kind of Puerto Rican Christian member of this community that believed in this way, and everything was seen through that binary lens, and it actually like took life out. Right? It didn't get. It wasn't
Mhm.
something that would give you life. It was something that limited
Yeah,
our experience of life, and
limited.
yeah, it's
And
a
I think
powerful
it,
thing.
even in like being growing up Navajo, we experience that too. Like this is a traditional teaching, but I didn't know it right until I'm in my 30s, and so a lot of like even like Navajo tradition has become a really like staunch binary sometimes of like we have a lot of people going around like you do it this way and this is the right way and this is the wrong way, even in Navajo culture. And I think that limits us and our young people to even like explore Navajo culture and like reclaim it and get it back. Like you were saying, it actually limits us. It doesn't help us to gain more culture, you know?
Yeah. It comes from a place of scarcity, fear, limitation. It's like life is
Yeah.
so complex, and then we just want to
Mhm.
fit it into this perfect categories, and it's never going to work.
Right.
It's
I
never
think
going to
that's
work.
also like the limits of English, like
uh,
English language, that we've also been
yes.
brought up in is like, And I think of the times that we're in as like we're reaching our limits, right? And more people realize it now. And those limits are, of course, like the environmental limits, the Earth's limits, like the limits in our ability to like uh, just keep working, put our head like we've reached our limits in that, and I think also we've reached the limits in just everything that we've been taught in this like kind of monoculture, right? And the limits of the English language we are dealing with now because English is all nouns, right? And so
Yes,
it
yes.
teaches us right off the bat to define, categorize, and rank even just the way that we think, and that limits us now as we have to like actually deal with pretty complex discussions and complex multiple truths, at the same time. And people I see like in the movement are really struggling with that because they've been trained to only think in like define, categorize, and rank. So people are running around trying to like define words and terms and frameworks as organizers, what I mean? As
Right,
opposed
right.
as opposed to building understanding no matter what words we use, you know? And like and for I'd say a lot of indigenous cultures and others probably is a language are actually more verb based. So it's not about naming that thing and categorizing it and ranking it. It's about knowing what is the relationship between you and that thing.
That is
And that's a
beautiful.
totally different way of thinking?
Yeah, it shapes everything, and it actually gets us at a conversation that you and I have had a number of times, and that is something I almost always bring up in this podcast conversations, which is the relationship to cancel culture. As sometimes I call it movement fundamentalism, sometimes I call it wokeness. It depends on right, but it's been a. It seems to me like we might be at a pivotal point there. It seems to me like more and more people are saying that's not working, right? And there's been some great pieces written recently. One by Maurice Mitchell has been going around um, about how we are limiting possibility through this kind of rigid fundamentalist approach to to our movements. And I know that you and I have talked about the lack of nuance in that, and the fear that people have in like saying the wrong thing or trying wrong things, and then there's no real belonging, right? There's just
Right.
fear of exile, which is very different from belonging.
Right. Mhm. Yes. I definitely see that happening all over the place. And I even struggle with it myself sometimes, like it's a hard thing to unlearn right away, but yeah, like I said, I think that's just the limits that we're reaching and it's also that people don't have the time, they're not given the time, they don't give themselves the time to actually truly reflect on these things. These are all like a lot of knee jerk reactions and emotional reactions, right? And coming from people who are quite emotional because this is the work that they're doing, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
what I've been doing on the side, is some consulting work. And one of the things I've been kind of testing out this year is just a little a workshop or a curriculum that's of 4 workshops that kind of I think it where do I don't the name of it is like or it's basically how to decolonize. That's not the name of it, but like and it goes in the pattern of like the first workshop's about your mind, right? And so the second workshop's about your physical self and then your emotional self and then your spiritual self. And so trying to provide some sort of direction of how people can begin to think about that. But it takes time, right? And to introduce these concepts and play with these concepts for people to move forward in a way that's not just all about cancel culture. But I feel like there's a lot of work that needs to be done to help people to express themselves in certain ways or again ponder and think about things and try to unlearn their dichotomous way of thinking a little bit um before having those conversations, right?
Yeah.
Which I think
Yes.
our movement
Yeah.
needs.
great. That's brilliant. I want to either take the workshop or get the materials because we've talked about it before, and it's very very exciting. I love well, if there's a way to link to it, I love to promote it when we put this podcast out because you're onto something really important. And I want to ask you more. This takes us right into kind of the gist of the conversation because the only way one gets where you are is by actually traveling the path. And I've seen you travel it, and I want to ask you about it. Before the question, I just want to make a note that I find interesting when you were talking about nouns and defining. Right, I'm doing the spiritual work myself around. It's the fancy word for it is a non-duality, right? Like there's nothing else. There's nothing other than what is, and everything that is awareness. And you can call awareness God, or you can call it self-aware being, or whatever word you have. But it's like we are identified with a separate self, but the separate self is an illusion. There's only the singular true self. But I only bring it up because the practice is to relax your attention, right? Because when you use your attention to like try to remember this, your attention wants to take something and grab it, right? Make it kind of concrete and specific. And so the more you do that, it's like it's this thing. It's like at least in our culture is you want to define and categorize and rank, and so that's how you're used to using your attention, versus like relaxing your attention back into its source, right, and being with what is happening. And I just found what the way you were speaking of it to be quite connected to this spiritual work that I'm doing for myself, and it is telling that is literally embedded in the indigenous language that you in many indigenous languages, especially the one that you're most familiar with. So I wanted to
Mhm.
lift that up as
Yeah,
a
yeah.
potent link, I think. Yeah, yeah.
100%. One of the things I always say to myself is your energy flows where your attention goes. So, like what you were
Right.
just saying, you know?
Yes,
And,
exactly.
and I agree. It's like, yeah, it's like the difference between just sitting there and shooting an arrow, you know, or something like that. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah,
yeah,
100%. The spiritual journey has been part of this for me.
yeah, yeah. That's part of what I want to invite you to share more about, because just as background for the listeners, when I met you, you were the head of the Black Mesa Water Coalition, and as I've read in some of the interviews about you and in our own conversations, you know, coming out of Stanford rather than going to work for big energy companies or big extractors, you went back home to the reservation, and this path was really enlivening for you. You met, you connected with indigenous leaders from all over North America, maybe sometimes the world, and it was something that was you worked on local economies. You just did all this amazing stuff. It wasn't that it was bad, it was awesome. And it was also within the nonprofit industrial complex. You were also the fundraiser in chief. You were also kind of the leader that was expected to be in all places at all times. And
Mhm.
it taxed you, right? This is part of what you
Yeah,
share. And so
yeah.
you went through this like health experiences, this family experiences, this spiritual experiences, and now you are an artist, and
Yeah.
you just had this solo show, right? And like you didn't like snap your fingers and say, I want to be an artist instead, right? You've been on this journey. uh
Yeah.
and I'm just, how would you tell the story of yeah, how would you tell the story of how you got here, and then I want to hear more about this experience of being an artist.
I'm sure. Yeah. So, I think for me, it really started in 2017, even before these recent few years, because that's when I was diagnosed with endometrial cancer. And so I had a hysterectomy, a total hysterectomy to cure myself, and I'm cured and all that now. But that was the beginning because it like really, like, something that drastic had to happen for me to slow down, right? And leading up to that, I would say I mean, as I look back on it, longer than I initially thought, but there was a time period, let's say 6 months to a year, where I knew something was wrong, right? But I
Hmm.
didn't do anything about it because I'm busy. I'm just pushing through. I got work to do. It's fine. I can put up with it until I just couldn't anymore. You know what I mean? So I would say that's what really made me slow down, and stop finally after all this time. Like, stop. And so I always say to people, like, don't wait, until
Right.
something that bad happens to you, listen to your body and take care of yourself. So that's where it really started. And for me, that's a big part of where the art started too, because I just had to get this image out of my head, which was that I had a blank, empty space in my body where my uterus was, like just an empty black hole. It just stuck in my head, like, after that. And I knew, like, I had to get it out somehow. And that's how the painting happened, in a
Yes.
bigger way, was because I had to paint that image and also, like, transform that image into something good. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, for me, I try,
Yes.
trans like that black hole that I felt like an emptiness in myself actually became more of like, um a black hole in terms of anything can happen now, right? Like, anything can be created, and it's not just about creating a physical human baby, right? That
Yeah.
power that's there is still there, and it's the power to create whatever you want, or the life that you want, right? So that's how it all kind of started for me. And at that point is when I start to seriously be like, okay, when am I getting out of this job? You know what I mean? Like, and really seriously starting to figure out how to transition out and, take sabbatical or something. I don't know. Um, and so then I left and I started to paint a little bit more after that, and it was fun. I didn't really consider it anything much, besides I like to do it. Um, and then, but really, so I made the plan to leave my work in 2019, which I did, and I had all these plans to, take travel. I like traveling. I love going, and I had saved up some money. I had a few months of sabbatical that I could use at the end of my time, and then the pandemic happened right at that moment. So I didn't get to do a lot of the traveling and stuff I wanted to do, but then it kind of forced me then to, I guess, travel more inward than outward, and like go ahead and surrender to the isolation and, just being here, like, and trying to make something out of it. um One of the little, I don't know, memes. They're like head memes, I guess, kind of that I have in my head now. But like the idea of like turning poisons into potions, right? So that's another thing that I always think of, is like, and like I said with that first painting, it's like, how can I take something that seems bad, feels bad, and like transform it into something that works for me? So trying to figure out how to do that with that time too. And so many lessons, and I feel like this year it's the same lessons over the past few years, right? Just more more intense, kind of like you're
Yeah. Yeah.
granting
The
God,
deeper.
like, okay, yeah, you kind of got it, but let's see if you really got it now.
Right.
But a lot of exploration and simple things over these years. Like, oh, and I should say, I also was blessed to win an award through the NDN Collective. It was the Changemaker Fellowship. So it's like a chunk of money that you can spend and just live off for a year. And that helped me, right? And I 100% believe that people, especially people who've been doing, this work for 15 plus years or something like that, um, they should just get a year or two off, to not have to worry about, because I'd say the first few months of my time off, I was like, oh yeah, kind of just felt like, oh yeah, vacation time. Do you know what I mean? But then after that, it was kind of like I experienced really like high anxiety because I was not busy. And it was really weird. it was like it's like when I was working, I learned that I have a high anxiety, right? And so when I was working, I could use that anxiety to get stuff done. But then once I didn't have that work outlet, it was just sitting there. And I was like, this is so crazy. So you need time, is what I'm saying, to kind of realize really what's up with you and where you're at and examine, is this really where you want to be? And I wish, and I'm grateful that I had that time supported, and I wish other people would, you know, have all that, like, be able to be blessed with that, because we really need it. Um, so I began to take classes and things I was interested in, and I took like my first little painting class. I took a writing class. I took some spiritual workshops as well. And just began to dive into those things that interested me and see where they took me. Um, some of the things that I had to like focused on, for example, is like, how do I feel? Like people, I thought I knew how I felt about things, but those were just assumptions from my mind. Do you know what I mean? Not like truth from my heart or spirit, you know? So I really had to sit every day and be like, how does this make me feel? And observe how things made me feel. And then the question of, how do I want to feel? What's the most important feelings that I want? And it's like, again, we make the assumption like, I want to feel happy, but what does that mean? Like, what is happiness for you? Versus for me, right? So like for me, a big feeling that makes me happy is feeling free. Like, oh, I want to, and so then it's like, so what makes me feel free, right? And for me, painting is a big, I mean, dancing too, right? But painting is something that makes me feel free. It's like you were saying, that's the thing that calms my mind down and allows me just to be present and open as opposed to thinking all the time. And that's why I've gravitated towards it so much. And I think I'm good at it. So
Yeah, it's beautiful. No, your work is spectacular. It's amazing. It's amazing. I can't wait for people to see it. Yes.
those are some
Wow.
thoughts if you want to
No,
ask some.
that's a beautiful, beautiful download of wisdom along the way, and I like what you're saying. I mean, I like so much of what you're saying, including the fact that there is definitely a system that keeps us running like chickens without a head, but we also contribute to it, because to slow down is to face ourselves. And there's a reason why we haven't, because there are old hurts. There is an immediate reality that is terrifying, right? And so to slow down and be with what is as it is literally the only way to get free, but also the hardest thing to do. Better to be running around carrying and arguing and working on behalf of beliefs that are just that. They're just beliefs, they're just ideas, they're not necessarily truths. A belief is something that you it's not something that you have, it's something that has you, right? And so we have all these beliefs that we're running around with and defending, but we haven't paused to find out what is true inside of us. And I feel like that's work that you've been doing, and that's work that you have also been expressing. And I just love the connection that you've made between that expression and that sense of freedom and the art that you are creating, and the connection that you've made to now without a uterus, right? You can what it does what it has gotten to you is this sense that it means you can create anything. And as we started the call, right, to me this sense of serving, of aligning ourselves with the evolutionary impulse of serving the creative life force of the universe, that when we are aligned with that, that's when we
Mhm.
are in resonance, right, with what is
Mhm.
unfolding, versus in dissonance with it. Yeah.
Mhm. 100%.
Thank you for the gift of your attention. If there's something here that resonates for you, something that feels true and good, think about a friend that you could share it with. We curate for each other, and that's the only way the good stuff spreads.
I'd say a big part of those years too is also just practicing like spiritual practices, whatever, like working in environmental justice and especially in indigenous communities. I've been taught like you have to protect yourself. And that's big on in indigenous organizing. It should be, for young organizers who don't do it, but it's like protecting yourself. So like I would always get, and even like for the organization or people, but also individually, like protection prayers. This is a Navajo thing, like go to medicine man. He basically like puts your armor on you or something, and like a way to think of spiritual armor or something.
Right.
And, you renew it, you re-up it and stuff like that. That's a kind of a very fast way to say it. But so for example, I was like, I want to know how to do it myself. I want to know how to
Mm-hmm.
protect myself so I don't have to go to a medicine man. I mean, I'm not saying like I don't want to go, and I mean, they have power. My grandfather was a medicine man, so I totally believe in it. I've seen miraculous things. I'm all there. So it's not to denigrate it, but it's also this idea of like we all have the ability to do these things to some extent, So that's what I want to learn, and I don't want my spirituality to be dependent on somebody else or what somebody else says or listening to somebody else. And so then how do I feel strong in, as you're saying, my connection with whoever, with the earth, with the elements, with ancestors, with guides and guardians, with the all, myself. So that was also part of all of it. And and those things are what helped me too, like to realize um I'm trying to think of a specific example. So gosh, I think it's called Spirit Guide Collective or something. Actually, Lynn, who was part of YCLN, another friend of ours, was the one who recommended me, to talk to this woman because I was having all these like dreams and thoughts or like visions during meditation that I was just not understanding. And so she was like, I recommend talk to this person. And that's how I kind of got involved with her thing. But I signed up for a class, which is like 6 workshops. And it's just basically practicing stuff. So it's like homework, which I need that accountability.
Yeah.
Same with working out, right? Like, give me a trainer because that's like I need someone to be accountable to. But so she had us like
Got it.
pull cards every day for the next 4 weeks. Pull them every morning, and just see what happens. Or practice reading for somebody else and see what happens. And so that was really, it was fun and it was cool and just like building up my own confidence in my own intuition and spiritual relationships with different spirits. So
Yes,
that was
yes, yes,
all
yes.
part of it too.
That's, that's great. That's great. And again, very, very concrete, as we were talking about in the beginning, in that, you have this opportunity to fly all over, but COVID happens and all of us are on the ground for a couple of years, and then at some point in that trajectory, you make the commitment to actually have a solo show by the end of this year. Can you tell us a little bit about that? About, because I'm always interested in that, the process of going from dream, right, and calling and hearing the pull into making something real, in the world, to actually doing the thing.
Yeah.
Tell us how that worked for you.
Yeah. Yes. When I took my art class, and I would say I always wanted to do art, even when I was young. um, it just never worked out though. Like, in high school, I would sign up for my electives to be in art class or writing class, and they always put me in strength and conditioning because I was an athlete. And so that didn't happen. And then in college, I was a science major, so I just didn't have many free classes at all, so I didn't do it there. And then trying to take some adult classes after college, and they'd be canceled, you know? So it was just like, I don't know what is going on with this, right? But I know it was something that I always wanted to do, you know? Um, so I took my class. I learned a lot from it just in terms of techniques, you know? And my instructor was really encouraging, like, I think you could do this. Like, you're good. You could, she's like, yeah, I think you could even probably teach this class if you wanted to. And, you know, that encouragement from people helped. And, you know, it took me a long time to just even be like, I think I might want to be an artist or something, you know, like kind of whispering it to people, you know.
Yes, I
And
was one of those people.
and then getting back like, no, you are an artist. And but I'm still in the learning phase, so I did have a goal, like, and I think I just reached a natural point where it's like the paintings that I had done over the past few years, I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to, if they want to go, or, you know, I'm ready for a new set
Yeah.
of thoughts and ideas, you know. So that's kind of led me to a natural point. And it was hard. It's building up the courage to just put yourself out there, you know. And I had been talking about, like, hey, I'm going to do a show in the spring, and trying spring of this year, like making room for it, telling everybody about it. But also I didn't really like, I can't think of a better way to say this, but I don't like it. Pull the trigger
Right. Right.
until until this summer. And yeah, it just took me a long time to build myself up to the confidence of trying, you know. And even immediately after I had found someone to work with on the show, or a space to host it, I was like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I should cancel it. Maybe this is the wrong space, you know. Um, but I think in terms of the spiritual messages I was getting, it was like, okay, now it's your turn to do your work. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, we've been helping
Yes.
you, and now you have to put in your effort too. You know, so it's like us being humans here on this world, you know, here on this planet, on this time and place. It's like we have to put that energy in too, you know. Um, so that's what I kind of held to, that thought of like, it's, I have to put in my energy too, you know, in this physical form. And that's what stuck in my head to help like push me to do it and stick it out. And I also, it was a big learning experience for me too. Like I I I had a lot of control over this, you know, which I think, like, maybe not a good thing, right? Especially if the whole name of the show was Surrender. And I was like, not, not doing it. But um,
Wow. That's incredible. That's incredible.
but
Wow.
but now, you know, there's different galleries and things here in Flagstaff. It's a little bit of an art town too. Um, and you know, it's standard for folks to take, like, let's say 30 to 45% commission. And so I was just like, I don't get that. I don't want to do that. Like, I'm not, you know. So I partnered with a nonprofit, with a space, to kind of like do the show on my own. Which it was a lot of doing a lot of things on my own, you know, and which I didn't even realize that needed to be done for a show. Now I understand the 30% plus, you know, because, you know, all that kind of background
Right.
work, and promotion materials, and insurance, and constant social media stuff, you know, like, that is a lot of work. What I learned. And so anyway, it was all a good learning experience for me. And I think it helped me to think of it that way too. It helped to build my courage to be like, I'm just learning, and letting myself just be there, as opposed to, again, this is the right or wrong choice, and this is the wrong or right time, you know, this is the right or wrong way to do it. Uh, but again, the lessons of the years prior, like, were put to the test, I would say, this year.
Yeah. No, I'm just writing that down. I'm just learning, right? Like, what a simple powerful
Mhm.
stand, right? That allows,
Yeah.
it allows for creativity, it allows for imagination, right? It allows for experimentation, which is the only way we're gonna get to do new things in the first place, right?
Right.
It's a it's a powerful journey. I want to ask you about the process of getting to the canvas, right? Because one hears you say, "I feel free," right? And so we know that one feels good, like I feel great after I do some yoga, you know. But it
Mhm.
was this morning. It had been weeks before I was on the mat, right? And then my body was creaky, right? And like, it's like, you know, that this thing, right? The meditation, the yoga, the creative work, like it's
Yeah.
all going to be good for you. Um,
You'll do it.
right, exactly. And so, as here you are making yourself available to this creative life force to move through you, and you know that it's a calling that you have.
Mhm.
How do you, how did you get yourself to the canvas? Was it, yeah, how did it happen? How does it happen?
Yeah, I mean, I'm struggling with that right now. And I would say with meditation, that's a tough one for me. It's like I love it. It's great. It helps. Why do I always have to force myself to begin? Again, it's still a learning process, but I mean, I'm kind of struggling with that now getting to the canvas because I haven't painted since the beginning of November or the very beginning of November right before my show because I was like nonstop with one of the paintings I was working on. I was working on it like 10 plus hours a day for a good couple of weeks and I was exhausted. I was
Right,
tired. My schedule was all crazy because I paint at night a lot just because also it's just when I get in the vibe and also this when the light is better for me or not or less distracting and where I paint, whatever. I paint at night. So I was staying up till like 3 or 4 in the morning for several weeks and my schedule's all crazy. So I needed a break, right? And I haven't painted since then. I just started to sketch some things today or last night. But it takes time and I think like something that I'm learning is like it's okay. Advice that I get from a lot of artists is paint every day, even if it's only 30 minutes, and so I was doing that a lot in the lead up to my show, but I've also learned you need rest too. Like I don't have to paint every day. And if I don't want painting to turn into work or turn into a chore, it is, right? I am painting because I have to for this and I will sell it, right? Um, but I don't want it to become something else that doesn't feel good to me, So rest is important. And even yeah, anytime I have a big output, I've learned because I've been observing myself so much. Like I have a weekly schedule that I'll show it to you. I know people have weekly
mhm.
schedules. My little weekly schedule where I like
I
write,
love it.
here's
Analog.
yeah, yeah, I like writing things. And
That's
then it
great.
becomes
It's
kind
so
of like my
good.
journal at the end of the year in a way, and I was like, here's the really high priority or high time or high effort or high energy things I need to get done. Here's the kind of low time or effort or energy priorities. And here's the other things if I have time. And I'll try and plan my week like that. But as I've been doing that, it's helped me to understand what I can actually get done in a week rather
Right,
than like, here's my
right,
giant list and here's my
right,
expectations
right,
for myself that I'm never going to meet. You know what
right,
I mean? I've been
yes,
able to be like, this is actually how I work. This is actually how like I can flow, and to be able to recognize different times, that I'm feeling a certain way. So that's also helped me to realize, oh, after I have like a giant energy output, I need 1 to 2 weeks of rest. You
right. Of course,
know?
of
And so then I
course,
put
right,
that
of
in there
course.
as well, right? Um, But, it is hard. I also have to have a clean kitchen. I paint in a tiny space, in my little breakfast what used to be my breakfast nook. And so it takes time to get there, but I think what I've learned is not to put pressure on myself too hard again to like judge myself that I need to be painting all the
Yes,
time and oh my god, I'm not painting, something's wrong because I need rest. So it's also about listening to yourself and I guess honing my intuition to know when I'm bullshitting myself You know
Right.
what
Right.
I mean?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like building up that awareness enough to know, like, when you're just procrastinating, and you know when it's time you need rest, or hopefully you do. I've been building myself to know that at this point.
Right. And so, but it takes some discernment, because sometimes you're just punishing yourself for thinking you're procrastinating when you're actually just really, really need the rest. I'm a big fan of one of the most important books I've read in a while is by a guy called Oliver Bergman, and it's called 4,000 Weeks: Time Management for Mortals. And he's completely like breaking down this ideology that we have around time management and productivity. And his newsletter is called The Imperfectionist, and it's so good. And so it's funny because it's like, I said, like you said, it's like non-binary. It's not binary. Like, for me today, I wrote on my reminder, and as a daily reminder. And these daily reminders work until your brain stops seeing them in the phone, pop up on the phone. But at the beginning, your brain sees them, and it's like, practice extreme kindness in building a good habit. Because the tendency is to crack a whip on yourself, right? And to punish yourself, right? As opposed to being very kind to yourself and almost like seducing yourself, right? Into a good habit, right? With love, with care, with like noticing how good you feel, right? As opposed to like skipping that part. So that's that practice. I mean, at the same time, we are doing this interview in late December, and we'll start January with this thing called Boost Your Practice, which is a program I do where people build these teams, and we all wake up by 6 a.m. We all have to commit to at least 1 hour of a creative practice, and it could be your work, it could be a project, but it has to be for you, right? It has to be on you. It can be for work, but it has to be yours. Can't be something put on you, right? Then you have to have, like, you can define your diet practice, but you have to have one. You can define your eating practice. The diet is not a good word, right? Your healthy eating practice, your exercise routine, and your mindfulness routine, and you decide what you want it to be. But your team rises or drops with you. Like, if you don't practice, your team loses a point, right? If you practice, your team gains a point. And in being together in this little team, supporting each other for 28 days, you have this kind of friendly competition and this support structure around building your practice, like you said, when you were working with that guide, right? So anyway, it's a cool program. So it's a tension between those two things, right? Creating a structure that helps you get it done, and also like never losing touch with your animal body, right? Because that's where the creativity is coming from anyway, right? It's from this animal body. It's like that's what the attunement with creation. And so
Hmm.
it's an interesting tension.
Yep. I think like our body, I've been becoming to think of like our bodies as like, this is our spacesuit, like this is how we travel through time and space, and this is where we can explore and be explorers, like in this life, you know. but
That's it.
but we don't, right? It's been changed a lot. I think also on the timing and getting to the canvas thing and all of that too. I think something that's been taught to me that now I'm practicing in a bigger way too is just like look to nature, like, right, like, what, it's a winter time. What's nature doing? You know what I mean? It's and just observing what your own energy levels are during these times. Like, oh yeah, we're busy in the summer, right? And looking at my calendar for the year, I'm like, oh, that just actually is true because look at all these things I did in the summer. This is the time of winding down, right? Winding down and resting and reflecting and that kind of thing. So it's not a moment of produce paintings, for me too. Um, yeah.
It's powerful. No, it's I love speaking with an artist, a creative person, because we just have to be in that. we have to be in that listening and that attunement for the art to be real. And also, like, we have to get to there are actual there are is often voices of resistance and fears that keep us from the canvas because we are exposed, right? When we are, I'm saying we, I don't paint, but I do feel like I treat my life as, and my work as art, you know, and certainly the work, yeah, a lot of the healing work is certainly that. And but you know, it's going to feel like a left turn here. But I'm looking at the time, and I want to make sure I ask you. Um, and even the question could be, you can correct the question itself if it's the wrong question to ask. But I feel like over the last 10, 15 years, there's been at least in the culture outside of indigenous communities, right? There's been like an indigenous like indigenous folk have come into the awareness of movements and people outside of their communities in a different way. It's kind of like a heightened awareness that that you've always been here, that you're here still, that you're holding something that is important to all of humanity right now, and that many of us just were not paying attention. So I don't know if we would call it a, I don't know what we would call it. I don't feel like revival is fair because you've always been alive, but there's a heightened awareness by non-indigenous folk about what indigenous people are bringing, and I'm wondering. Yeah, I'm wondering what are your observations about that, or either the redirection of my question, or yeah, how do you feel? Are you sensing that to be true yourself? Are you seeing that there's in this a kind of an awakening from the outside to what indigenous people are bringing?
Yeah. I think maybe, I feel like, as someone who, like, I've been an indigenous person working in the movements for all this time, and I feel like my experience has been, definitely like allyship, but people don't really get us when we're talking about things, like, and it's why, like, even people of color communities support things like carbon trading and carbon markets when us indigenous people are saying no. You know what I mean? Like, that's still there, right? Because and and so what I've experienced is people kind of looking at native folks like they're kind of have a vague spirituality stuff over there, but not actually incorporating any of that into the work. You know what I
Right,
mean? And
right.
or thinking like it's so simple. Like, I remember us bringing different indigenous speakers to kind of movement spaces, especially local, like where it was happening, and these elders who are like really respected in indigenous communities talking to these folks, and these folks not getting it, right? Because it seems like something that's simple to them. Oh, live close to the land. Well, that's so simple concept, but it's because they're not actually engaging in it. They're just like, oh, Indians vaguely spiritual over there. That's how I've seen it. Um, and when you look at things like the just transition framework, for example, the two circles and the it's supposed to help us understand different strategies that exist in the entire, like, possibilities of just transition. Um, but they have a box in there at the bottom that's like the culture filter or values filter that is completely unexamined or explained. It's just a box there. And that to me is reflective of the larger movement not understanding indigenous values and how to put them in practice, not just it's a vague thing that you only think about and feel good about sometimes, you know? And I think it's because people don't want to understand don't want to acknowledge their own role as settlers here. They want to belong here too. And so it's hard for them to examine that it's not that they don't belong here, but that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I
It's like,
do.
why
I
so
really do.
why so many people are like, I'm indigenous too, right? Oh, da, 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 I'm indigenous. I have a history, and I see that a lot more among just all kinds of people of color too. Used to be a lot of white people who said that, right? The Indian princess, blah blah. But now it's a lot more than white people, and it's one of those complicated subjects, right? Because we want to say, yeah, you do have indigenous like blood in your veins and history as someone here from America, sure, but okay, what does that mean? What does that mean now in how you interact with this place? Do you hold the responsibilities of your people the way we do? So like it's a different they're different levels. You know what I mean? And I feel like most people like they want a lot of Americans will do anything to be like, I belong here. They don't want to examine the negative impacts that they actually have to indigenous peoples and indigenous land here, not just in the past, but now. You know, all the people who live down in Phoenix or Las Vegas or Los Angeles, they don't want to acknowledge how living there impacts us Navajo people because of our coal mining and fracking. And so, you know what I mean? Like that to me is it still needs to come together, you
Yeah,
know? And to me, it's
yeah.
part of
What
that
I'm hearing from
decolonization thing, you know? It's like, and the workshops that I'm doing is like, what's your actual actions as an indigenous? Are you protecting this land? Are you connecting with the spirits? Are you, you know, like, I don't know. So I feel like there's a lot of people, like you're saying, coming into this kind of new understanding, but again, kind of like separately than actual indigenous people, right? It's like it's the personal journey. It's not about the land necessarily or their responsibilities. It turns into like, it's my right to do this, to say this, to be here. It's like the rights versus responsibilities that Native people have always brought into the conversation, right? Rights versus responsibility. It's our
yeah,
responsibility,
yeah,
it's not our right, you know? And to bring up this, I always bring up these statistics. One is that of all the like across the world, indigenous people are like 5% of the population, like people who are, you know, indigenous by whatever UN standards or something. 5% of the population, yet on our lands and the lands that we caretake for is 80% of the world's biodiversity. That's what being indigenous means. Or another way to look at it is like indigenous people are 400% better than 95% of all the people in this world at taking care of the land. That's what it means to be indigenous, okay? And like and here in the United States and Canada, Grist magazine did a article last October, that said that indigenous organizing in the US and Canada has resulted in reductions emissions of 25%. Okay.
wow,
What's everybody else's organizing doing? And that's with us in the
right,
US and Canada being 4% of the population or less. So there's
wow,
obviously values and ways of moving in the world that are different, that I say that's how indigenous people move through the world, right? And
right,
so it's more than, oh, I once heard it, I had an ancestor that's indigenous, and therefore I'm going to speak on behalf of indigeneity and
right,
indigenous peoples. You know, like that
I
stuff
understand.
I'm not down with. But
Right,
that is a doorway to open, right? To actually go into the world of what it's like to be an indigenous person in this place, you know, and then, you know, like truly, and to understand and to start to build that connection and life ways with this land so that the land accepts you too. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Again, it's not the
right,
dominating thing. You know, what I've been taught all this time by all these indigenous elders that I've worked with through my work is that the most important thing that you can do is build and strengthen your spiritual connection to the land and elements. That's it. That's what the work's about.
yeah,
Most people don't want to do
yeah. I
that.
get
Or
it.
they don't know how to do it or how to start, right?
Right,
Um,
right, right,
so, you know,
right.
I've seen a lot of this kind of connection or resurgence of connection to spirituality and indigeneity has being absent of indigenous people, and that's kind of where I have a problem with it.
Right.
You
This is great.
know?
I'm glad I asked the question. I'm glad I asked the question because your answer is very powerful and very clarifying. There's might be that there's just a long way to go. Like there's yeah, there's just a long way to go, and the clarity with which you speak of it is extremely helpful. And there's a potency there that transmits, and that it's my prayer that the listeners will hang on to the essence of what you're saying, and they engage in this work of building and strengthening a spiritual connection to the land, and like really grow our awareness about what indigenous people are holding and how they're
Yeah.
living right now.
And
Yeah.
I live in Flagstaff, Arizona, which is a border town to Navajo Reservation and Hopi Reservation. It's a border town, and it's a a very outdoorsy place. Like people traveling to the Grand Canyon stay here, and hiking, biking. Like that's the people who live here. And we have a mountain here that's called Dokoslid in Navajo language. It's our one of our sacred mountains, and it's our western boundary area. So, like, a difference between me and someone else in Flagstaff and how I treat that mountain, outside of there's a big debate about a ski resort up there too, but I won't get into that. But like me, I don't just go up there just to like hike around and da 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 da, right? Because it's a powerful place, and there's all kinds of like, as an indigenous person, I can point to that mountain and be like, this is on that other side of that mountain. That was the first place that we ever had like hojanje, this certain ceremony. Other people can't do that, right? To point to the place and know where things happen in your
Right.
own culture and heritage, and also it's so powerful. I painted it. There's a painting about some of its teachings and things, but like that I don't just go up there to, let us say, like looky loo around and like, oh, be in nature, because I always ask for permission to go up there, and it's always for a purpose. I don't just go up there. Do you know what I mean? There's a because it's an important place, but also it's so powerful. It can take stuff from you too, right? Like if you're all blessed and you're running around up there, and the mountain's like, "What you doing up here?" Okay, well, you came up here, you didn't offer me anything. I take this from you. You know what I mean? So that's just a concrete example of how I see the landscape that I live on currently different than other people here do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You
That's
know?
so. Yeah. No, that's just deeply moving, deeply moving, and yeah, the kind of heightened awareness that we have to even interact, and how necessary it is, how it is essential to our coming into right relationship with the earth, is remembering those ways, and learning from the people that hold them. It's powerful. Thank you for sharing, and I feel the passion in your words, and the feelings that it brings up, and I'm honoring that too, and holding that in my own heart with you. um we are we're coming towards a close, and I in a moment I'll ask if there's anything else that you want to that has been unsaid, but I always invite my guests, with their consent, to go on a brief time traveling journey. And so the invitation is to take a moment and kind of move ahead to the future, and see if you can see yourself 20 years from now, and some of the things you have been working on have been accomplished, including your own, especially your own spiritual work. And some haven't, some things have succeeded, sometimes have failed, sometimes have taken longer than you thought, sometimes some things have defined you, and you can begin to embody that older self and the wisdom that that person holds, or the woman holds. And if she could come back here to this moment right now, what would she have to say to you and to us? What would be the teaching that she would transmit to us, as we stand here today?
Mhm. Mm, that's a good one. Well, I mean, what you're saying to me is just keep going. You're on the right path. Um, I think. I think what she's teaching is bringing back the matriarchy, or is like bringing back the
Yes.
feminine, the women's, the or feminine energy, however you want to call it, to this world, and that it's there's so much more to it, right, than what we've been taught is defined as what women do and men do. We understand that whole gender binary and how it's crap. But Also, part of like the women's energy is creativity. It's magic. It's dancing, it's receiving, and then doing with the male energy, so all, it's all the scary things, right, that we're afraid of. That's the woman's energy. And it has a power, and it's not good or evil. It can be good or evil, and everything else, right? But I think that's really a lot of what we're missing is we're afraid of like you said, knowing who we really are. Like I think part of my spiritual journey too is like to connect to, I mean, as Cleo Gibran says,
Yes. Yes.
you his poem on self-knowledge, for example, it's like, I have not found the path of my soul. I have met the soul walking upon my path, right? And the soul walks upon all paths and blah, blah, blah. That's my favorite poem of his,
That's so beautiful.
but
Thank
I
you for
that's
bringing my
right.
music.
I think that's right. It's that, and I feel like I've gotten a hint of that too, is like understanding myself and who I am beyond this space that I chose this time around, and I think that's what's really helped me to break a lot of barriers that I've been stuck in, for my whole life, right? And that is what's helped me be strong too, right? And feel rooted and feel strong and feel connected, is making that connection. So I think that's what I want more people to be able to do. Like I realize now it's not about finding the correct campaign,
Hmm.
or strategy.
Right.
There's definitely uses for that, you know. But how do we get people to open themselves? That's it.
Yeah,
Right?
that's
Open
it.
themselves.
That really is it. That's where you and I and our work meet, and
Mhm.
it feels like a very very sacred place
Mhm.
to end. Unless of course you have to give you the last word if there's anything else. And I want to tell you that we meet there for sure. What is it? How do we help people open themselves? And as you know, I'm committed to men's work, and so
Mhm.
much of the work that we do is about that. It's about how to relate to the holy feminine that you've described as you have described her. You
Mhm.
know how to take our role in honor and in service and in protection of that.
Mhm.
Um, Understanding, without getting lost in role binaries, but knowing that some of us some of us do identify some of us in masculine bodies identify with masculine energy, and that there's something we can do with that that is in service of what is needed right now for
Mhm.
humanity. So I want to remind you of that because you inspire it in me. And yeah, if there's anything else that you want to say before we close.
I do. First, just like, yeah, thank you for the work with the men, because that's a tough one. That's a lot to unlearn. That is a lot to unlearn, and that's some tough work. So, and it needs to be done 100% with all of us. But I'd say, yeah, for men, it's a tough one. But also, I'd say the last thing I would, just building off of what I said previously in this, is building. I just encourage people to build their ability to trust in their own intuition and trust in the messages that they're getting from wherever those are coming from, right? Be able to discern, hopefully. Again, I was saying this, like, this female energy is like to receive, the way I think about it. And that receiving has been turned into like a really patriarchal thing, right? Like, I do and you just kind of receive, right? But our power is that power of intuition and connection to spirits and the all. That's the information that we receive, right? That's our ability to receive. Right? In the female side, that's been taken over. Like, we're told what to receive now, right? We're given things to receive. Right? And that's how we end up. That's what guides us into our actions. Right? And those are things like buy stuff, that makes you happy. That's something that we receive and do now, right? So
Right.
you have to figure out how to where else are you receiving from and what messages are
Right.
those that you are receiving to make your actions out this way good for you, purposeful for you, right? And so then that ability of trusting your intuition and building your own trust in yourself and listening to yourself. So many of us know what we should do, but we don't do it. Right? So that's, I think, the muscle that I encourage people to build, you know?
Yes. Ashe. Ashe. Thank
Mhm.
you so much. You're a blessing. Your journey is an inspiration. I'm so glad we have
Thank you.
finally had this conversation, and
Me
I look
too.
forward to just being in conversation with you forever
Yes.
until we're done with this body. Is You're quite a blessing. And I can't wait for
Mm,
people to get to know your art that you've made so far and the art that you'll keep making.
thank
Um,
you.
Thank you again. Many, many
Yes, thank
blessings to
you,
you.
Gibran. You're the best.
Thank you. Signal versus noise. There's so much competing for our attention. And I am so glad that you stayed with us through the end of the podcast. It should mean that you're finding something meaningful here. Hopefully, something worth sharing. And so I'm asking again that you think of somebody who would be touched by this conversation, who wants to be a part of it some way. It is a decentralized conversation. It is a way in which we're changing ourselves by leaning in towards each other in places like this and in the exchange of these ideas. So, who's a person or two that will be specially moved by what you've heard here today? Send them a text, an email. Let them know we're here. We're not trying to reach everybody, but we want to reach the right people. We want to keep having this decentralized conversation. We want to keep working on getting right to the edge of the evolution of consciousness and culture to see what we find here together. Thank you again for being a part of this. Liking the podcast helps. Subscribing is definitely a good thing. Feedback is always welcomed. Stay in touch.